Theatrical Shenanigans Law and Order series, Episode 2. Hello there, and welcome to our second episode in this Law and Order series here on Theatrical Shenanigans. For those of you who don't know this voice, I am your host Rachel Feeney Williams, and today we bring you another play entitled The Case of Bloody Mary. Mary-Beth is in court trying to get justice for the death of her friends, but this is no ordinary courtroom, and the defendant, you guessed it, is Bloody Mary. Theatrical Shenanigans presents The Case of Bloody Mary by Rachel Feeney Williams.
This week on Law and Justice Supernatural Division, Mary-Beth Henderson is prosecuting Bloody Mary for emotional and psychological damage following the brutal murder of her three friends Mary Sue, Mary Jean, and Mary Ann during a camping trip. Bloody Mary is countering the claim, citing a mental disease. All rise. This court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Lucifer, Prince of Darkness, presiding.
Sit. No sense in wasting good shoes. All righty. All parties in the matter of the mortal realm, in this case, represented by Mary-Beth Henderson versus Bloody Mary, present and correct?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Howe, for the prosecution of Bloody Mary.
Objection, Your Honor.
Getting started early, Mr. Rao?
The title of Bloody Mary was forced upon my client by a prejudicial society, and I believe could prove to be a prejudicial tool by the prosecution in this case.
I quite agree.
Your Honor!
Mr. Howe, I am sure you were guilty of many misdeeds in your youth that earned an unfortunate nickname. That is not a pattern I wish to repeat in my courtroom.
But...
Henceforth, please refer to Mr. Rao's client as Mary. Would that be suitable? Marvelous. Let the record show that Mary has responded in the affirmative. You may continue, Mr. Howe.
Very well, Your Honor. Mr. Howe for the prosecution of Mary.
And Mr. Rao for the defense.
Very well, gentlemen. Proceed with opening statements.
Your Honor, may I just comment once again that I think it's a huge conflict of interest for you to be overseeing this case.
Oh, really, Mr. Howe? And why would that be?
Well, you are Lucifer, sir.
Mr. Howe, are you calling my credibility into question?
Well,
Because it wouldn't put you in the greatest position, antagonizing a judge before your case has even been presented now, would it?
Objection withdrawn, Your Honor.
Oh, good. I'm glad common sense has won out. Proceed.
Mary-Beth Henderson and her friends were just four wholesome, fun-loving American girls enjoying a camping trip as part of their youth. A privilege enjoyed by many, but for these girls, it was not to be. For that wonderful time they shared together was cut short as they were brutally murdered by Mary. Mary-Beth, as a result, has been left severely, emotionally scarred by these horrific events. And the judgment in this case should reflect that.
Mr. Rao, do you have anything you wish to add?
Yes, I do, Your Honor. For years, legendary figures like Mary have endured an unfairly tarnished reputation through tales that have become little more than Chinese whispers through history. Coupling this with the fragility of her mental state as a result of being pulled back and forth from her realm to the human world, and is it any wonder she cracked? That is what you must ask yourselves, because that is what this case is really about. Mary is the victim here, and that is what I shall prove.
Very impassioned, Mr. Rao. Mr. Howe, can you proceed with your first witness? I have a golf game with the Archangel Gabriel this afternoon, and he hates it when I'm late.
Very well, Your Honor. The people call Mrs. Burns to the stand.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
Mrs. Burns, you were the chaperone on the camping trip in question, were you not?
Yes, sir.
And on the night in question, can you tell the court what happened?
Objection! The witness couldn't possibly know exactly what happened in the girls' tent.
Sustained.
My apologies, Your Honor. I'll rephrase. Mrs. Burns, on the night in question, can you tell the court what you witnessed?
Yes, sir. I completed final bed check at 10 p.m., and all the girls were tucked up in their sleeping bags.
Then what?
I went to bed, sir. I woke around midnight.
And what woke you?
I heard screaming, sir. It was coming from outside my tent, so I went to investigate.
And what did you see?
I saw Marianne being chased down by a creature and...
Objection, Your Honor. Prejudicial language.
Your Honor, Mrs. Burns cannot help what she saw or how she chooses to describe it.
I'll allow it, but you're treading a thin line, Mr. Howe.
Mrs. Burns, what happened next?
Marianne stumbled and fell. She was crawling away when that creature stabbed her. She stabbed her so many times. It was just awful.
And what did you do?
I am ashamed to say it, but I hid in my tent until it went quiet, and then I called 911. That was when I found Mary-Beth. She was hiding in some bushes. The other 3 girls were dead.
Mrs. Burns, do you see the creature?
Your Honor!
My apologies. Do you see the person that killed Marianne?
Yes, I do. It was her. Bloody Mary.
Order!
Thank you, Mrs. Burns. I know that cannot have been easy for you.
Good morning, Mrs. Burns.
Good morning.
I understand you've been through turmoil, but could you answer a few more questions?
I'll try.
You have been the chaperone on the last 3 trips for that particular class, have you not?
Yes.
Although, school protocol is that teachers should be rotated when it comes to chaperoning to allow them to enjoy more of their time. Isn't that right?
I suppose so.
So why were you chosen for this particular camping trip?
I couldn't say.
No. Could it be that you'd been disciplined by the school only a few weeks before for shirking responsibilities and abusing sick days?
Objection, Your Honor. This has no relevance.
I beg to differ, Your Honor. My line of questioning clearly applies to the quality and reliability of the witness.
Objection overruled.
So, Mrs. Burns, you had been forced to be a chaperone for the camping trip, even though you didn't want to.
Objection. Is there a question here?
I'll rephrase. Mrs. Burns, did you want to be on that camping trip chaperoning those young women? You're under oath now, Mrs. Burns.
All right, fine. I didn't want to go.
So, you were on a trip you didn't want to be on with girls you didn't particularly care for. Am I summing that up right?
Your Honor, he's putting words in the witness's mouth.
Tread carefully, Mr. Rao.
My apologies, Your Honor. Mrs. Burns, that evening, before the girls went to bed, what did you do?
Well, we had dinner, and then sang campfire songs, and then...
Yes?
I told them a scary story.
Speak up for the court, Mrs. Burns.
I told them a scary story.
And what specifically was that story about?
Bloody Mary.
So, in the middle of the woods, at night, while being on a trip you didn't want to be on, You thought it was a good idea to tell 4 impressionable young girls a story that provided instructions on how to summon a killer being?
Objection! Your Honor, he's badgering the witness.
I didn't think they would do it.
Oh, really? Did you give them any kind of warning against acting on the story they heard?
Well, no, but...
So, essentially, you handed the gun to a group of teenagers and then was shocked that it went off.
Your Honor!
No further questions.
Redirect, Your Honor.
Be my guest.
Mrs. Burns, did you, at any point while telling the girls the story of Bloody Mary, want them to come to any harm?
No, I would never.
No further questions, Your Honor.
You may step down, Mrs. Burns.
The people call Dr. Edward Stein.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
Dr. Stein, you are the top researcher into myths and legends, are you not?
I am.
Could you tell us, in your own words, the tale of the tale of Mary?
Careful, Mr. Howe. Another slip like that, and I will throw this case out before you can blink.
My apologies, Your Honor. Sincerely.
Go on, Doctor.
Well, there are, of course, many different versions of the legend, but the most prominent version is that she is a murderous spirit, said to appear in the mirror when her name is chanted.
And what inspired that legend, Dr. Stein?
The infamous Tudor Queen, Mary, the First of England.
And why is that the case?
Because she burned 280 Protestant worshippers during her reign, alive.
Order!
Doctor, have you ever witnessed the ritual summoning of Mary?
Yes, a few times.
And what happened on those occasions?
Each of those responsible for the summoning met with a gruesome and brutal death.
So, in your opinion, Doctor, the title of Bloody Mary is very much justified.
Objection.
Withdrawn. Nothing further.
Dr. Stein, how many of these summoning events were you present at?
Maybe 5 or so.
And yet you appear to have not met with a brutal death. How very convenient for you.
Objection. Argumentative.
Withdrawn. Dr. Stein, you cite Mary Tudor as the basis of Mary's legend. Is that correct?
Yes.
And history reported her as Bloody Mary for the deaths she caused.
Correct.
What about the things history didn't report?
I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll explain. How about the fact that Mary was the first woman to rule England in her own right and simply didn't inherit the throne?
Well,
Isn't it in fact stated that the way she seized the throne from those who sought to thwart her was nothing more than unprecedented ambition?
Is there actually a question here?
Is there, Mr. Rao?
I'm getting there, Your Honor.
Then do it. Quickly.
Isn't it true, Dr. Stein, that your own book, The Brutal Founding of Bloody Mary, was debunked recently by historians who stated, this is a story of how a heroic underdog became a monarch who was then mythologized as violent, despite being no bloodier than her father, Henry VIII, or other English monarchs. It's a tale of sexism, shifting national identity, and good old-fashioned propaganda, all of which coalesce to create an image of an unchecked tyrant that endures today.
everyone is entitled to their opinions.
Isn't it also true that keeping the fear-mongering myth of your version of Bloody Mary alive allows your books and merchandise to keep flying off the shelves, all the while sullying the name of my client in the name of profit?
I am an expert in my field.
Only the part of the field that suits you.
Enough! Mr. Rao, do you have any further questions for this witness?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
Then ask them civilly.
Dr. Stein, as well as being an expert on this myth, you have also made a study of spirits in general, have you not?
Yes.
Tell me, Dr. Stein, what is the Lentox Queen?
It is the small gap between our world and the next that allows spirits to pass through.
Or be summoned through by the means of ritual, is that right?
Yes.
Dr. Stein, could you please read the highlighted passage from your book?
The Lentox Queen is a small portal, no bigger than the gap under a door. It stands as a doorway between our world and the spiritual world beyond. The spirits are able to pass through the portal at will. However, when summoned through seance, ritual, or similar, they are torn through the portal against their will. The passing could be similarly described as being crushed momentarily by a large truck or possibly a tank. And while spirits do not have a body to damage, the damage done to the mind on a journey like this would be most severe.
Thank you, Doctor. Do you believe the ritual for summoning Mary is widely known and used?
It has become a popular dare-type task amongst teenagers.
Teenagers like Mary-Beth and her friends?
Your Honor!
Dr. Stein, is it fair to say that, in your expert opinion, someone like Mary, who has been summoned hundreds, maybe thousands of times during her spiritual existence, has had her mind permanently altered by the repeated transition?
Objection. Dr. Stein couldn't possibly confirm.
Dr. Stein is listed as an expert witness in these matters, Your Honor. I am merely utilizing his expertise in the same way the prosecution did.
The witness may answer the question.
It is possible, yes.
So, just to confirm, Doctor, Mary is a woman who has spent some of her life and all of her afterlife tarnished with a nickname that not all believe is fair, and then also gets to spend her afterlife having her spirit yanked backwards and forwards, each time slowly destroying more of her mind. Surely, considering all that, you'd want to commit murder too.
Objection!
Withdrawn. No further questions.
You may step down, Doctor.
We call Mary-Beth Henderson to the stand.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You may be seated.
Good morning, Mary-Beth.
Good morning.
I know it must be hard for you
Objection. Is this a line of questioning, or does prosecuting counsel simply want to hold the young lady's hand?
All right, Mr. Rao, you've made your point. Move it along, Mr. Howe.
Mary-Beth, can you tell us, in your own words, what happened that night after Mrs. Burns left you in that tent?
Well, the story that Mrs. Burns told us.
The story of Bloody Mary?
Objection. Leading.
I'll rephrase. Mary-Beth, can you confirm what the story was?
It was the story of the spirit Bloody Mary, and that she'd attacked and killed some campers in the night after one of them had summoned her.
And what happened after you'd heard the story?
Well, the story, it made us kind of giddy, so none of us really thought she'd come to life.
Who summoned her, Mary-Beth?
Oh, we all did. We passed Mary Ann's compact around, and we each said it. It all happened so fast.
And what happened then?
Before we knew where we were, she had appeared. She killed Mary Sue and Mary Jean before they even had a chance. Mary Ann fled from the tent, and she went after her. I tried to go, but I must have fallen and hit my head, because the next thing I knew, I woke up in the hospital.
Mary-Beth, do you see the person who killed your friends in this courtroom?
Her. It was Bloody Mary.
Thank you, Mary-Beth. No further questions.
Mary-Beth, how long had you and the other girls been friends?
Since we were 5.
And you never fought?
Girls always fight.
Yes, of course. How silly of me. Ms. Henderson, who's Billy Langley?
Billy? He's my boyfriend.
You mean he was your boyfriend?
Objection. Relevance?
Oh, I assure you it's relevant, Your Honor.
I will allow the questioning for now.
So, Mary-Beth, your relationship with Billy Langley?
Well, Billy was my boyfriend, but we broke up.
And why was that?
Well,
Was it because he was seeing someone else?
I...
Someone close to you? Someone you trusted?
Is the witness going to be allowed to answer the question?
Oh, certainly. Well, Mary-Beth?
He was seeing Marianne.
Order!
So, what happened, Mary-Beth, after you found that out?
What do you mean?
I mean, isn't this you taking our copy of Dr. Stein's book about the legend of the vengeful Bloody Mary?
It was research for a school project.
Would this be the same school project that saw Billy Langley brutally die a week later?
It wasn't.
Found out about Marianne and Billy and were determined to have your revenge.
No.
So, you went to see Billy one last time and convinced him to call upon Bloody Mary as harmless a joke, or so he thought.
Please.
And then, once the poor tormented spirit had taken care of him, you turned her on your friends.
Objection! Badgering!
You made sure your friends each called out Bloody Mary before you that night, didn't you? To make sure that only they were tainted by this ritual. And that you would be spared Mary's wrath.
Your Honor!
Mr. Rao?
You did it, didn't you?
Yes! I called the old bitch back from the grave. I even made sure all three of them did it so she'd be good and mad. It may have been Marianne who betrayed me, but the others, they knew about it. I watched her slice them open and I loved it. Every one of them deserved to die.
Order! Order! Remove the witness from the courtroom. In light of this outburst and the evidence that has come to light, I will be dismissing the case against Mary without prejudice. And now the only thing to do is return Mary to the spirit world. And I think this time I will make it so you won't have to worry about being pulled to and fro again. If you would be so kind to stand in the center of the room. Please, all join me.
Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary. Bloody Mary.
That was The Case of Bloody Mary by Rachel Feeney Williams, with George Sapio as Judge Lucifer, Darren Ingram as Mr. Rao, Robert Sawyer as Mr. Howe, Tony Targin as Dr. Stein, Jacqueline Priscorn as Mary-Beth, Megan Bickel as Mrs. Burns, and Joe Swenson as court clerk. Theatrical Shenanigans is part of an RFW Scripts production, found on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and Podbean. Theme music is written and produced by Chris Cody.